Hi, everybody. Welcome to Back to Basics Nutrition. So we'll kind of just get right into it, but I also want to say if anybody has any questions along the way, feel free to reach out, put something in the chat or just, unmute yourself and interrupt me, let me know that you have a question, and I'll be happy to answer it where I can. But to get started, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Tiffany. I'm a board certified and licensed nutritionist. And I came to this space because I struggled with my health for a really long time with undiagnosed thyroid issues, which eventually was diagnosed as thyroid cancer. And from that, I had to go through all kinds of hoops, jumping through all kinds of hoops to get the help and support that I needed in order to feel and function better. But the bottom line is that I was not getting better. I was not getting the support I needed, and I had to take matters into my own hands. And for me, that was nutrition. And that's what I do in my practice to help people who are, have unresolved issues, not really getting the support. They still feel terrible, even though their labs are normal, that kind of thing. That is what I do to help people feel better. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to talk to you today about kind of the back to basics nutrition in order to help fuel your workouts with ferals. Okay. So this is really important to do because you probably heard that you can work out all you want, but it's 80% nutrition, right? To help you make the changes in your body. And when you deal with that, they're trying to fuel the actual workouts, make sure they have energy to get through their day, to do all the other things you need to do at night with kids or family or whatever else you need to do. And if your nutrition isn't on point and you're depleted because you're doing intense workouts, that is going to be a problem, and you're not going to really have the results that you're probably looking for. Okay, so the first thing we need to look at is, how's your nutrition status? So if you have some of these things that are on, these questions, if this resonates with you, there's a good chance you have some nutrient deficiencies. So do you lack energy? Do you have aches and pains? Do you have poor gut health? Do you have dry, flaky skin? Do you feel anxious or depressed? You can kind of toggle back and forth between those two things or sometimes deal with both. And then do you feel sad and unmotivated? I guess it kind of goes into the depressive piece of it, but sometimes we just don't have the get up and go that we once had, especially as things start changing with stress levels or hormone levels, things like that. It can all impact how you feel and how well your body is given the nutrient support will affect how you are functioning. Okay. So if those things resonate with you, this is even more important to get these back to, these basic things on board to help you with the workouts that you are, going to be working through. All right. So one of the first things, and I'm not sure if they talk to you about this when you sign up for your program or not, but one of the first things you need to do is think about those goals. Like, what do you want? Not what someone else thinks you should do. What feels good to you, even if it's just kind of a bite size. It doesn't have to be, just as an example, if you feel like you need to lose 50 pounds and in this 10-week challenge, probably not a good idea to start out with a goal that you're lose 50 pounds in the 10 weeks or whatever. So that's just a simple example. I think you get what I mean. So think about what it is that you want. Not what someone else wants, not what other, like some chart at the doctor's office says you should be as far as your weight goes. But maybe you're also trying to look at, do I have better energy throughout the day? Do I have better focus? Do I have better motivation? Do I have better outlook? Those are some things that, you might look at as a goal. It doesn't have to be the number on the scale or whatever. It doesn't have to be those types of things. And then think to yourself, okay, will you be able to do it? Meaning, will you be able to stick with the workout, stick with the nutrition, even if it's just little bits and pieces of the nutrition that we, start implementing? And then think about what gets in your way. I always tell my people in my programs that if you look at the calendar over the next 12 months from today, there's going to be something every month that could potentially take you off your game, can probably, have you fall off the wagon, whatever it might be, whatever saying you want to say. There is always going to be something, a birthday, a holiday, travel plans, a vacation, whatever it might be, that will get you in your way. So how do you keep on keeping on? during those times so that you can still achieve your goals. Now, that doesn't mean you completely go off the rails. You know, we don't want you to be on or off a plan. We want you to modify things for when things aren't the normal for you. Okay. So let's talk about the back to basics eating. I kind of have talked about this kind of thing for a long time in my practice because people come to me and they're like, "What do you think about keto? What do you think about me about carnivore? What about low fat, you know, high carb, low no fruit, whatever." All these extreme examples of dieting and crazy fad diets and things like that. And the bottom line is it's not really sustainable. And if you're feeling some of the symptoms I mentioned at the very beginning, you need more than that. You need to get back to your basics of nutrition and you need to refuel your body so that you can recomp your body. Okay. So back to basics eating is where it's at. So right now, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's My Plate. I don't know if they've changed it since. But the USDA or the USDA recommends people eat from the My Plate, and then they have the little categories when you look at a plate, how big your portion should be of different foods, right? So I like to kind of go a little bit against that in the sense of getting away from their recommendations because the food pyramids that you maybe seen in the past. I know I feel like when I was a kid, I feel like I was like 5 food groups or something like that. And you know, they categorize them very different than how I look at them. We need to look at what kind of fuel is going into the body. Those pyramids and those My Plates and there was a sideways pyramid. I don't know. There's all these different things. Those are created through lobbyists by, you know, go to the government, go to Washington and lobby to get on the best place basically on the food pyramid. Because I'm just going back to that pyramid from, I don't know if it was probably 10 years ago even. If you were at the top of the food pyramid, that was like going to be the better place to be, or the worst place to be business wise, you know, for the dairy and cattle farmers and that kind of thing. So then they lobbied to get things flipped, you know, so it's not really about our health, it's about business, right? So we need to kind of steer away from that and then just get back to the basics. What do we know is good for us? The 3 food groups that I want you to understand are proteins, fats, and fibers. Okay, we could call fibers carbohydrates. So they're the macronutrients: proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Fibers are carbohydrates. So we want to sort of prioritize protein because you're going to be fueling, well, not just because of that, but we want to fuel it because you're doing lots of heavy, intense exercise. But there's a million other reasons why we need proteins. I won't get into that so much today, but you want to prioritize protein. You want to make sure you have healthy carbs and you want to have healthy fats every time you eat. Okay, so I put in there what gets in your way just to think about it. Is it time, meal planning, not sure what to eat? You know, there's all kinds of things that get in our way for making decisions to help us feel better and, and eat better. Just gonna check for messages. And then when it comes to really dialing in the types of carbohydrates we can handle, it sort of depends on where you're at. You know, if you're eating a standard American diet right now that has, you know, 300 or so, 250 to 300 grams of carbohydrates a day as a normal, you are probably not want to start doing low carb keto or something like that. You want to kind of graduate down so that you are feeding and fueling your body so much better. For the protein, let's see, I'm going to go over here. For the protein, you know, how much do you need to eat? Women in particular seem to overestimate how much protein they're eating, which means that they're not getting enough 9 times out of 10. When I'm working through people's intakes, we talk about things, they're like, oh, I get plenty of protein. I have protein at every meal. And then we start talking about it, and they're actually very much under eating because they're overestimating the size or the portion, or they're eating kind of bad quality protein. So that's another factor that needs to be put into play. So how much protein do you need? So you need to have about 1 gram per pound of ideal lean body weight. Okay, so not the weight that you're at now if you're not where you want to be, but you should think about where felt your best, where you felt lean, strong. And I always put in there that if you didn't have to bust your butt at the gym or starve yourself to stay there, that is your ideal lean body weight. And to be honest, I work with people sometimes that don't even have a clue where that is. They've always been, fairly overweight and really struggle to even determine what that lean body weight would be. So then what I would do with that is stick to loosely kind of the height and weight charts. You can look them up anywhere, BMI charts and things like that. You can use that as a guide. It doesn't have to be exactly the number that you need to shoot for, but that's what you're going to determine your protein intake for. And this, of course, is if doesn't apply if you have chronic kidney disease, you've been told you have to eat super low protein. That is not for you, that recommendation. So I know some people who have end stage kidney disease, and they're only allowed to eat about 30 grams of protein per day. Okay, so that's not going to be the situation for you if you have that condition. You do not want to eat the 1 gram per pound. So you want to eat 100 grams minimum per day in order to maintain the skeletal muscle that you have. As we age, which starts at about 30 years old, we lose 3 to 4% of our muscle mass each year. So over a decade, by the time you're 50, you've lost, potentially 10, 12% of your lean muscle mass. When you do that, you have slower metabolism. You're not building hormones. You're not building your immune system. You're not building hair, skin, and nails. You're not helping your anything, right? You're creating the building blocks to repair your tissues or anything like that. So you need to eat the protein, especially in the setting of intense workouts. If you're lifting heavy weight, you need to have the protein on board. Okay, so what does protein do for you? Just talked about that. I could probably talk to you about what protein does for an entire hour, just that alone. I won't do that, but I'm just saying that there's so much that it does that I want you to take this very seriously. So the first thing that you should do is, I know that you're probably already saying to yourself, oh, I probably eat this much or that much, but I want you to track your obvious protein. If you want to track all your food for 3 to 5 days, that's totally fine. But if you want to track just your obvious protein, meaning like chicken, steak, eggs, things like that, or protein powders, that is fine. So just track that for 3 to 5 days on your normal days and see where you are at per day, and make sure that you're getting that minimum of 100. If you're not at the minimum, then you need to build up to that minimum. So keep working so that you get 100. And then once you're at that 100, then you need to build up to yours. So if you, or your specific goal. So if you feel the best at 135 pounds, then you should work to get 135 grams of protein, or at least between, say, 110 and 135. So we can do a little bit of range in there. We can play with it a little bit, but you need to get that 100 grams minimum. And the reason is for protein synthesis occurs when we have that much protein in our body because of some specific amino acids that you're assured that you get in at that level. So does anybody have any questions on protein and what to get or concerns about that? Okay. I'm gonna go through something here that stands out with the protein, something that I run across with people once in a while, and I just want to throw this out as a caveat. Make sure that you're not struggling to get the protein in, or if you're struggling to get the protein in, that instead you just opt for ready-made on-the-go protein shakes. I'm talking like convenience store ones, or the ones you get at, a lot of people talk about the ones at Walmart, those ready-made liquid proteins, because there's a lot of extra junk in them. And I just say this one extreme example. I worked with a couple people like this, that they didn't like to meal prep, they didn't like to cook, they didn't like a lot of food. So they drank 3 Premier protein shakes a day. So they got their 90 grams. And then they maybe had like a couple beef sticks or something like that. That's all they did. That is not what I'm talking about for getting the 100 grams minimum. And you're not going to feel good doing that. You're not going to achieve your goals quite as easily doing that. Those proteins, those liquid ready to go proteins used regularly they're just less than quality proteins. Okay, so it's not going to be super helpful. So that's just the caveat there. The other thing to think about is avoid doing all the like protein products. like protein granola, protein, what am I saying? Protein granola, protein oatmeal, like the ready-made stuff or the microwavable things, protein waffles, I mean protein bagels, things like that. If you do those here and there to help yourself out, that's one thing. If you're relying on them for the majority of your protein sources, you probably will gain weight. So that's just something I've seen over and over again. So just try to eat whole food protein more often than not. Okay. Then let's look at, oh, got a question here. Um, no, if you realize you need more protein at the end of the day, is there harm in eating more at the end of the day? Especially if you're working out. I think that is totally fine, but then it's kind of a fine line because the more protein you eat, the less hungry you are. And I also want you to listen to your body, right? So if you, let's say if you are working out a lot or you're taking GLP-1s, things like that, and you haven't gotten to that 100 grams minimum, then I want you to get the 100 grams minimum in. I want that to be a kind of a drop dead deal breaker. If you are supposed to be getting 150 grams protein a day and you're short and you're only at, say, 115, then I'd say it's probably okay if you're not hungry. If you're hungry, eat. If you're not, I'd say just pass on it and start over the next day. Does that make sense, Ashley?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's that fine line between teaching your body, listening to your body, but also getting in what we need. One of the things I see on a regular basis is where people struggle to get the protein in because they either sort of have an aversion to it. They don't really like the proteins because it sits in their gut like a rock for way too long. They might feel nauseous. You get full really fast. Protein is very filling. It's very, very satiating. So it is going to keep you from eating junk foods, or it's going to keep your blood sugar stable so you don't do that. Now, I do a lot of gut testing, and what I see with people is that they have such little stomach acid. So eating proteins doesn't feel very good right away if you're adding a bunch. So if you get to that point where you start adding more protein and you're like, oh, it just doesn't feel good, I may feel a little nauseous, or I feel too full for too long, then you need to get something on board to help your stomach break it down. And I'll give you guys some recommendations for a couple things. The time of this training is really kind of nice if you are in the need for any kind of supplements or want to get like protein powders or something like that, because I have a coupon code that kind of is mimicking the Prime days, and it's through my supplement company. It's 25% off. So it's kind of awesome. It doesn't come around very often. So I'm going to pass that to you guys here at the end so you can access anything that you want from there, including the enzymes to help you break down proteins if you struggle with that. Okay, so let's go on to produce, or I guess it's under the carbohydrate situation, under that category of macronutrient. Um, Proteins, carbohydrates, and fat, right? So carbohydrates are going to cover the vegetables, the fruits, the nuts and seeds, the grains, and then a lot of the junk food, especially if you're eating a standard American diet. People are getting just highly processed carbohydrates, highly ultra processed junky carbohydrates that are anti-nutrient dense, right? They're actually not supporting your nutrient status, which is contributing to all the things we talked about in the beginning, hormonal balance, energy, brain fog, all those kinds of things. That is definitely contributing to that. So again, kind of a mantra I like to say with all this, and I think you can take it with you and however it applies into your life with regard to your nutrition and your exercise, is start with where you're at, just make it better. So going back to the protein, if you're only getting 50 grams of protein a day right now, and it is what it is, that's where you're starting, but just make it better. How can you get 60 grams a day the next week? How can you get 70 grams a day the following week? You just start with where you're at and then just slowly titrate up. Same with an ultra processed diet. If you are someone who is eating, cookies and muffins and sugary coffees from different coffee shops. You eat processed food most of the time. Start by pulling out one processed meal a day and making a whole food meal. Start with one thing a day and go from there. Because the carbohydrates that people eat in our society is, like I said, 250 to 300 grams of carbohydrates. That all turns to sugar or glucose in the body. That causes problems with your metabolism. It makes you insulin resistant. It doesn't contribute to your lean muscle growth at all. And it just gets stored in your body as either fat or it gets stored in your liver and causes issues with your liver. So we need to eat the right kinds of carbohydrates. Now, all carbohydrates will turn into glucose in the body, but looking at the picture here, a red bell pepper is going to turn into a lot less sugar than, say, a donut from the grocery store, right? Or a Little Debbie type of thing. That's going to turn into a lot of sugar. Okay. And the other things that we need to understand is all the color in the foods on that picture, they mean something. Those colors do stuff in our bodies that help us feel and function really, really well. The foods that are in the processed packaged things, even though they've been, put lots of dyes and colors and they make them really appetizing and especially for kids and things like that, they don't do anything for your body. It's completely just food production, food manufacturing for selling to us. Okay, so if you're trying to up your metabolism, if you're trying to recomp your body, we need to eat the protein and then we need to have the good carbohydrates to go with it. So how much do you need? So if you are metabolically stable, meaning you're close to where you want to be with, body weight and that kind of thing, but you maybe like to recomp a little bit, improve your muscle mass, decrease some fat and things like that, you can safely, depending on glucose issues, if you're type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic or even type 1, I guess, you can do like 1 gram of protein to 1 gram of carbohydrate ratio. So if your goal is 120 grams of protein, you could probably easily deal with 120 grams of carbohydrates. Okay, so that's really a way to start. If you feel like you're a little metabolically unstable, so meaning if you're overweight, you're trying to lean out a little bit more or a lot more, you would reduce that. Keep your protein at that baseline or up to your goal protein intake. And then you would probably go to 100 or 90 grams of carbohydrates. So you'd have less carbohydrate to protein ratio. Okay, so what they do for their body is that they provide energy. Carbohydrates are turned into glucose. That glucose gets shoved into the cells of your body to provide energy. But when there's too much glucose from all the carbohydrates that are being, the bad carbohydrates primarily, it can't all get into the cells. It becomes resistant to getting in there, and then you become insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, type 2 diabetic, and then your metabolism is shot. Okay, it starts to be really sluggish way before you get diagnosed with something. So the kind of action step for this is look at how much produce you're eating. Plants, okay? Any kind of plant. I don't care if it's a starchy carb. People oftentimes are like, "Oh, I can't eat fruit, it's too high in sugar," or "I can't eat a potato, it's too starchy." Um, Yes, it can be at some point when you have to correct things that are kind of gone awry in your body, but no one ever got unhealthy from eating, an apple or for eating a potato. That's not what caused them to be in the state that they are right now, potentially depending on where you're at. What it is, it's the combination of things or the ultra processed diet that we've become so accustomed to. So the more plants you can eat, the better. So I would prioritize vegetables and then low glycemic fruits, especially if you are, significantly overweight or you've been told you're pre-diabetic or something like that. I would stick to fruit because they are lower on the berries for the fruit because they're lower on the glycemic index. They have a ton of antioxidant nutrition and they have really good fiber. The vegetables also have a lot of fiber. The other vegetables like salad type vegetables, even some of the starchy vegetables will be very helpful in supporting your gut health, which will help your metabolism. Okay. So, Any questions on that part of it? I could go on and on and on about this part of things because I see this on gut health a lot because people are eating very little produce and fiber because people are afraid to eat fruit or they're afraid to eat something starchy. What I see is that in our gut, our microbiome, I'm sure you've heard that term, there needs to be diversity of the microbes and also balance of the microbes. And when we have an overgrowth of some microbes and an undergrowth of others, we have this thing called dysbiosis. So if that sounds like you and you feel bloated and you're full, or you have constipation, or you have diarrhea, or you go somewhere in between, we go toggle between the two, or if you just constantly feel full and disgusting after you eat, no matter what, you probably have that dysbiosis, and that can be remedied in part by eating many more different plants. Okay. The one plant I didn't talk about were the grains. So we can talk about, the rice or wheat, rye, barley, the gluten grains, the seeds like quinoa, things like that. I would say that if you are metabolically unstable, you would want to keep those types of products or things made from those things down to a minimum just because of their issue, the issues it can cause in some people's guts and also with blood sugar. So I'm not saying you have to eliminate them totally unless you're celiac and you need to, keep wheat and stuff like that out. But just minimize it or have it small servings, or maybe it's one serving a day. So you don't need to always have bread with every meal or whatever. So those are going to be a little, there's nutrients in them, but I would say the plants are going to be a lot, like the vegetables or fruit are going to be a lot more nutrient dense than a piece of bread, unless you're, making it your own or doing sourdough or something like that. That's going to be a little different story. So, if anybody's ever had sourdough, especially if you're making your own, not store-bought sourdough, have you ever noticed if you eat that compared to commercial bread, how you get very satisfied and it's filling just with a normal slice of homemade sourdough versus processed and commercial grade type of bread? Just think about that with any types of homemade food versus the processed version of it. Just pay attention what your body does with that. Okay, so we need to reduce our sugar intake. So that's under the carbohydrate category. So if we look at the natural sugars, we're talking about fruits and veggies, talked about that a lot. You can use things like stevia leaf or monk fruit. There's something else called allulose that's in, I don't have anything to show you right now. I thought I might have something here. But allulose is something that's used as a sweetener that's made from different plants, like different fruits and vegetables. And it actually is shown to be beneficial. There's a company called rxsugar.com that makes products sweetened with the allulose, and it's actually beneficial for your gut health and your own natural GLP-1. It can be actually a little bit beneficial for you. So it might be something to try if you feel like you have that sweet tooth and it's hard to get away from. If you got some of their snack sticks, they have like chocolate mint flavored ones, things like that. But they're good and they have a good sweet taste. It's not fake. It's not an artificial sweetener. So it's not like aspartame or something like that. And it actually doesn't make you want to keep eating it because it's not highly processed. I mean, it's a processed food because it's a sweet thing made from this allulose, but it's actually made of good versions of chocolate or good versions of, the mint flavor and things like that in there. So try to look for things like that. Like I said, it's rxsugar.com. I'm not affiliated with them. I'm just telling you about them because I have used them and I do recommend them quite a bit. But start, thinking about your natural sugars. Once you get away from the stuff on the right side of the screen, more, once you reduce significantly or altogether, the stuff on the left in that natural section is going to be plenty sweet for you. Your palate will change, and then your cravings should change too. But going back to protein, if you have enough protein on board at each meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and if you need a snack, you're going to feel so much better, especially with that craving aspect. That's going to be diminished quite a bit because it'll balance your blood sugar. All right, so sweets. So commercial baked goods, soda, candy, carbohydrates like chips, popcorn, crackers, bread, cereal. I can't tell you how many times people say, I don't eat any sugar. Like I am so clean of sugar and I cannot get my goals. I can't get to my goals. It's just not working. And then we go through their intake and we see they're not eating, sodas and candies and commercial baked goods, but they're eating popcorn every single night and they have toast in the morning, but they don't associate the fact that that carbohydrate that's not sweet isn't sugar. Okay. So what I mean by that is whether it's the commercial baked goods, the candy or the soda, or whole wheat crackers, all of those things turn into glucose in the body. So just because it doesn't taste sweet doesn't mean it's not sugar. Does that make sense? I just wanted to clarify those 2 points. Okay, so how to reduce the sugar intake and improve the gut health and get all this stuff in. So there's so many kind of things on this thing that I want to talk about. But if you are eating balanced with protein, veggies, and getting in the healthy fat too, haven't even talked about the fat part of it yet, you are going to be reducing that sugar naturally in your diet. You're going to be increasing your fiber and you're going to be having a much better balance and diversity in your gut. You will start to get rid of the cravings that you might have. You might just kind of lose the desire for junk foods or sweets and things like that just over time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it will over time if you keeping on prioritizing that protein and carb balance. So I want to go back to the fat for a second. I must have taken that slide off. But with fat, what you would do is prioritize the protein, get that minimum grams of protein in, round out, the carbohydrates to that ratio, like I talked about, either a 1-to-1 ratio with your protein or, I don't know, I would say 1 to 0.75, something like that, or 1 to 0.8 ratio for the carbohydrates. So if you're getting 100 grams of protein, try to get to, 90 grams of carbohydrates if you're trying to deal with your metabolic health, okay? If you do have metabolic health issues. Then with the fat, you would round out the rest of your calories from fat, right? So I would say in back to basics eating, dial in that protein first and let the rest of it fall where it goes. But just think to yourself, okay, what can I eat for my plant today, for this meal, for this breakfast, for this lunch, for this dinner? Get your protein dialed in, add a plant, fat will naturally come with it, and then you'll feel so much better. I do another training in here with the dialing in the macros, like for fat loss and stuff like that. So I'm not really getting into that right now. If you have questions about that, you certainly can. But that's something I do in another group with another group of Farrell's people. So when you get that protein, fat, and fiber or the carbohydrate thing all dialed in, you'll start to feel so much better in so many other ways, not to mention fueling your workouts. So this is not like a hard and fast rule, these recommendations here for pre and post workout fueling. But if you're doing, pretty intense workouts and you're not used to that, you're going to probably want to have something on board a little bit prior to the workout, a little bit after the workout. So, and again, it's just more planning. If you're not working out first thing in the morning, it's, you have to pack it and bring it with you to work or whatever to make sure you get it before your workout. But you might want to try something that's a little bit easily breaks down to provide some of that fuel for your workout. A lot of times people do like a rice cake and turkey, hard-boiled egg and an apple, or even half an apple, yogurt and banana. Those are just some simple examples. I will say over time, just with some of my things with thyroid cancer and frustrated with eating, like trying to eat perfect, and it doesn't help me feel better or in any way, shape, or form. So over time, I had gotten to a point where I rarely ate or I ate very little carbohydrates, and not really on purpose. It just sort of happened over time. And I was working with someone myself, and he said, why don't you have some complex carb before you work out? And I was like, I'm not even hungry before I work out. Why would I do that? Why would I add a carbohydrate? And I listened to him and I did, and it made a big difference in my energy and my recovery and everything else. So that's something to consider. Based on how you feel, just use a small amount to start, a small serving, snack size kind of thing, just to see how you feel. And then after the workout, try to get some protein and carb combo to replenish your glycogen stores, help your recovery, especially women. And not even, it doesn't even have to be like, I think it's past like 30, 35. Our recovery is different. We need lots of creatine on hand, to help with recovery. That helps it makes a big difference in your recovery too. But if you're getting in that protein and carb combo, that's going to be good. Fats are okay, but keep them moderate to allow quick nutrient absorption, because fat will just help it's good for blood sugar and managing symptoms, but it'll allow like a slower absorption of the nutrients that you need, so it won't help you recover as quickly. So try to avoid like a fatty snack after a workout. So examples would be like some leftovers, cottage cheese and berries, protein smoothie with fruit, that kind of thing would be a good way to do that. All right, and then some of the underrated things like hydration, we kind of never really talk about it because everybody's like, yeah, I'm drinking water. Everybody carries around a giant water bottle with them. We all know this, but even 1 to 2% dehydration can lead to mental fatigue, reduced strength and endurance, and then slows recovery after your workouts. A lot of times the workouts just feel harder. So we need, and this is kind of a rule of thumb. There's not a lot of actual science on this. But the rule of thumb is to just drink half of your body weight in ounces per day. And if you're exercising intensely, especially more than an hour, add some more. If you're sweating a lot, if it's hot, if it's really hot out, really humid out, all those kinds of things, just add more. And then avoiding, alcohol and caffeine around the times of workouts, especially, it's dehydrating to your body. So if you start out your day with a cup of coffee, you're probably going to start out with your day with a cup of water too. And then you're at like baseline. Then it's kind of canceled it out. So you're still going to start with 1 glass of water or whatever container you use or whatever after having your coffee with a water to cancel out the dehydration. That's kind of how I try to think of it. Again, not an exact science on that, but that's just kind of something you should think about. If you have a cup of coffee in the morning like I do, you really should have some water to go along with it or before it or after it or something to sort of at least start you out at baseline. All right, any questions on anything? Okay, so your next steps. You should assess where you're at with your protein, whether you track all of your food for 3 to 5 days or you track just the obvious protein for 3 to 5 days, average it out, get your baseline, and then just make it better. Same with plants or produce. Okay. How many plants are you eating? How much produce are you eating each day? Have you been restricting carbohydrates, therefore you rarely eat any fruit and not much for vegetables? Are you doing carnivore, which there's a lot of benefit, therapeutic benefit for keto and carnivore, but sometimes if you're feeling sluggish, you're not feeling better, you're not getting to your goals, you need to come out of that for a time and then you can jump back into it if you want. One thing I didn't mention, and it kind of goes back to gut health, is that people who eat 30 types of plants per week are healthier overall for all causes than even people who are vegans, who are eating plant-based. Okay, so when I'm talking about plants, I mean vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts and seeds, all the different types of things that grow from the ground. Okay, so look at where you're at. Just take kind of a quick assessment. Make little tick marks through your day when you're eating your meal and look at how many plants are in this meal, how many plants are in this meal. Just see where you're at. And then like everything else, just make it a little bit better. You don't have to do all of the 30 right away, but just see what variety you're getting, because that's going to be a sign of how well your gut processes, absorbs, how it works for you so you can feel better. Check your hydration, make that better, adjust according to your intensity of workouts, the temperature outside, which is probably not going to be too much of a problem for us in the next few months and things like that. But just, take note of those things. And then the one thing we didn't talk about at all is that movement and mindfulness. So you have your hour long or whatever length of workout you do for this program. But what do you do the rest of the day? Do you sit in front of your computer all the day because you're tied to it because of your job? What you need to do is go, okay, I can't just do an hour of an intense workout and then sit the rest of the day. That's what I know. I've done that in the past. I've just thought, oh, I'm good. I've done my workout. I don't really need to move the rest of the day. But we need to get movement or steps or time or whatever it is in to your day. So layer it in things like around your lunch hour. Maybe you take a half hour lunch, sit and eat for 20 minutes, and then get up and walk around for 10 minutes or something like that. Just think of ways you can build in your movement outside of your Farrell's workout. Okay. And then mindfulness to help calm the nervous system. That could be something you would just do at night before you go to bed or on like as a part of your bedtime routine, winding down, read a book, journal, whatever it looks and feels good to you. Do something like that. Make it 5 to 10 minutes each day, whether it's before bed or in the middle of the day, whatever works for you. This will all lead you to your goals, whatever they may be, with regard to Farrell's, your body composition, fat loss, energy, whatever it is, that would be something that will help you move you towards your goals. Okay, so you can reach out to me if you have any questions or if you want any extra support with your nutrition. You can jump into the Total Health Reset Facebook group. Do trainings in there every week. You can follow me on Instagram, Total Health by Tiffany. And my website is tiffanyplaton.com. And I'm also accepting insurance for Blue Cross Blue Shield, a lot of the Blue Cross Blue Shield programs. There's others pending and stuff too. So I'm working on all that. So if anybody wants any information on that, you can fill out a form and I can just call to make sure to verify benefits and we can go from there. And check eligibility. I'm getting a lot of people who are actually getting their services covered 100%, $0 out of pocket. So it's pretty handy for people when they want some support with their nutrition. I'm just gonna send you the code in case you want to look at anything for supplements, just because, like I said, it is a really good deal right now because of the Prime days. I'm just getting to my link so you can check it out. And there's the creatine in there is really good. I use that. So if you need something for recovery from your workouts and things, that would be a really good option. As well as like protein powders or even just like your random multivitamins and vitamin D and magnesium and that kind of thing. So there's the link in the chat. Plus, so you might want to copy and paste it for later. It's good for tomorrow and Wednesday. But it's right there and that'd be 25% off of any of your order that you would want. Does anybody have any questions?
Can you pop your Instagram back up again too, so I can
I can.
follow? And then I had just a question about like, I struggle with just like fresh produce and fruits, and maybe just say a little bit, and sorry, I was late, like canned or frozen, like obviously no syrup, like if it's in water, like no extra juice. Is that okay?
Yeah, so okay, I'll put my Instagram in first.
Okay.
I'll do one thing at a time here. Okay, so that should, I don't know if that'll, I mean,
Yep,
you won't be able to
Perfect.
link it, but you can copy it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so the fruit. So fresh, of course, would be ideal, but where we live, we're not getting the greatest quality fresh fruit from random places anyway. So if you can do fresh, that would be awesome. If you can do organic, that would be more awesome. If you can do frozen, like for making smoothies and things like that, protein shakes, using frozen fruit, I think is awesome. I would say like on the list, canned fruit would be third on the list, but if you're doing where it's just in the juice or, not obviously not the syrup and things, that is fine. So I wouldn't say don't ever do canned fruit. I'm just saying try not to make that the bulk of what your fruit is.
Yep. No, understood. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, try to get more because they just are a little bit more lacking in fiber, things like that.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's what we kind of want to look at. So just try your best to do more of the whole fresh ones, but the frozen stuff is good. Yeah.
Mhm.
Frozen and fresh and then in the canned when it's for convenience or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Was
That's
there
super
something
helpful.
else too?
Nope, that was it.
Okay.
That was super helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, good. All right. Anybody else?
You have another question. You had mentioned the protein drinks, like the pre-made ones, and like even protein bars and things like that as really not recommended, maybe in a pinch, great, But what about just like a regular protein powder mixed with like almond milk? I mean, is one a day too much of like the kind that like Farrell's sells just
Um,
to get protein, I guess?
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem. I don't know what theirs is. Like I don't know the quality of it. Is it a whey protein? Do you
It
know?
is.
Okay.
Yep.
So some people and whey protein is kind of known for recovery and all that kind of stuff. Um, in some people, it can cause issues with blood sugar, right?
Hmm.
So you maybe wouldn't even know it if you're not having extreme symptoms. I'm just saying that as like the one thing I have seen for some people, or if they have issues with dairy, right? That could be another thing. But no, I think protein powders, um, especially if they're good quality, are going to be fine. I mean, if you're using them to get you to, your minimum of grams of protein that you want to get, if you are, um, going to do that versus go the drive-through, 100% a powder protein shake is going to be good. Like I said, it's the Atkins protein shakes or it's the Premier protein shakes that are a little bit more of the problem, you know. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. Like,
Okay.
what specific things would you look for, like in like protein shakes to be like what you say quality? What do you look for?
Well, a lot of times I'm gonna put the one that I use. It's a bone broth protein. It's one I use primarily. I'm just putting there for options. It's not like I think you have to only have this kind. But it's super duper clean. Like there's nothing extra in it. This particular one is chocolate flavored, but if you were to just copy and paste it and then look at the ingredients, it's got the collagen protein in it. It's got the natural flavors, which in the United States they can label that. And we don't really know what it is, but I know how this company tests their stuff and where they source their things. It's got cocoa powder in it. It's got medium chain triglycerides, and then it's got stevia in it to sweeten. That's it. Usually, if you look at some of the nutrition shops that are kind of popping up around here, if you look at the list of their proteins, it's like tons of extra ingredients, just that you can't pronounce. That would be clue one, that there's a huge list. That'd be the first clue. And then the second clue is if you get towards the bottom of that ingredient list and it shows that it's got sucralose, acetylamine K, um, they might label it as Splenda, but usually they label it as their brand or the generic name, which is sucralose for Splenda, and then acetylamine K is just another artificial sweetener. So that's what I would look for, and I would avoid those because, like, when people drink a Diet Coke, not that I'm saying that it's healthy to do, right? I know it's not, but you don't think it's healthy. When people are buying $100 jars of protein shakes, they are thinking they're doing something healthy, and often it has those types of things in it. So that's what I would be careful of.
Thank you. My other question for
Yeah.
you, and this might be more like individual. So, but like you touched on macros and like the combination of like carbs, fats, and proteins. Like, how would one determine what is the right macros for them?
Yeah, so that's where I was saying when I do the macro fat loss class for ferals, we go into that in detail. But what I would start out with, and I can email you or you can email me some more questions about it too. But what I always tell people do is get that protein in. That should be the first priority. So let's say I'll just do a quick rundown of what I do with people. Okay, so and then this recording will be sent out so you could take a look at it too or listen to this again. And then just know it's like 50 minutes into the recording.
Okay.
So what you would do is you start with your ideal lean body weight, and I'm just gonna use 100 pounds just for easy math. So at 100 pounds, you're gonna want to, or to get to 100 pounds, if you're not there, you want to eat between 12 and 1300 calories. And that's because I multiplied the 100 by 12 and 13. It's just a shortcut for a formula to get to your your ideal macros. So if you're eating 1200 to 1300 calories, and I'm telling you that you need to have 100 grams of protein, um, that's going to be 400 calories worth of protein. And then I said that we should have, maybe if you're not metabolically stable, we're going to do 90 grams of carbohydrates. And then that I'm calculating here. That's going to be 360 calories of carbohydrates. So that's 100 grams protein, 90 grams carbohydrates. And then the rest will be fat. So if I use 1200 calories, subtract my 400 for protein, my 360 for carbohydrate, I have 440 left for fat, and that's 48 grams of fat. Okay, so I know that was really fast. But that all comes from the math of 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. 1 gram of carbohydrate has 4 calories. And 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. That's how I figured that math out. So, so that's you'd figure it out. Now, if you were someone who is, say, 5'4", they're 350 pounds, and they really should be, their ideal lean body weight is like 150, say. Now, if they have 200 pounds to lose, it might be hard to go from wherever their calorie count is now down to, say, 1600 calories. So we might baby step that, but we'd have to flip around the carbohydrates for sure. We would want to keep the protein stable and keep that as like drop dead deal breaker, non-negotiable. They have to get this many grams in. And then I would think to lower the carbohydrates for a time and kind of toggle those back and forth. Then the fat just follows. It just takes up whatever the carbohydrate fluctuation is. Think of this. Protein is a functional macronutrient. It builds all those things we talked about. It builds your hair, your skin, your nails, your hormones, your immune system. You can't really just store it for energy. Like in extreme situations, that happens, but that's not what it primarily does. Carbohydrates and fats are fuel for your body. Those are fueling macronutrients, whereas the proteins are functional, like building block type of nutrient. So think of it that way. So that's where the nuances come individually a little bit, and everybody kind of starts from a different place. I don't know your biochemistry. I don't know if you're on medications. I don't know if you're diabetic. I don't know if you have thyroid problems. So that's where sometimes those numbers can be tweaked. But simply, you can start with making sure protein is at your baseline, and get that dialed in, non-negotiable, getting that in every day, and then, play with the other things as you work through your goals. So it doesn't have to be super duper strict. as far as I only eat this many grams of protein and this many of fat and this many carbs every single day without fail. It has to fluctuate with how your body is changing. I could go on and on, but I won't. I'll stop it there unless you have any other questions. Okay. Did that answer your question? I can't remember if that was Ashley or Angela.
Yeah, it did. And then the question behind the question is just I've had a trainer in the past who recommended like carbs at 45%, protein at 25, and fat at 30. So based off of your one-on-one, it just feels off. So I'm just
Yeah.
questioning my own.
It's hard to go off of percentages too. You know,
And that's just the percentages that I have set up in like MyFitnessPal or whatever.
oh, gotcha.
So,
Gotcha.
yeah, that's what I'm basing it off of. But I
Yeah.
mean, it has that grams in there too. So I can maybe email you offline. I just want to get it dialed in because I mean, I do largely go off of like general grams or whatever. So
Hmm. Yeah. So the and I don't I've talked to many different trainers over time too, and they have a different take on it. They're not maybe taking in that some of the things I am. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying I'm looking at a whole different thing with the biochemistry of things and different health conditions and where they are metabolically. So if you 25% protein, I think, or depending on what your grams, what is it? Does it say how many grams it turns into in your MyFitnessPal setting?
uh,
Just
the
curious.
grams of protein you said is
Yeah.
90. The goal is 97.
Yeah, like that's fine for just maintaining the skeletal muscle that you currently have. That's not going to help you build, change your body composition, make your hormones, nothing.
So you're suggesting probably that seems 25% protein seems low.
Way low. So
Okay.
I don't know what your ideal lean body weight is, but I don't know. I'm just a lot of women, and I'm just saying it's between like 130, 150, something like that. And that obviously everybody's different, but you need to get closer to that probably. Unless you're 4'9", and are just a really tiny person. Yeah, so I think that's really low. And I think you'll have more energy. I think and I don't know anything about you, and so I just know you'll probably have more energy. You'll probably start having less cravings. All those things will start to come into play when you get in the protein, as long as you don't have the kidney disease or something like that I already talked about. That's the caveat that we need to rule out, that would not apply to your recommendations. So, yeah. But just start slow. If you're already getting close to 100, just try it. Like, how do I feel at 110? How do I feel at 115? You can go slow. You don't have to jump right up to whatever the, lean body weight is. So,
Awesome. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. All right, ladies, lots of A's here today. So it's hard to
That's kind
know.
of funny.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know which A asked me the question now. Okay, so hope that helps. Reach out if you have any questions, and maybe we'll see you in the next training, or maybe the next one that you guys would be on, and we'll talk more specifically about macros for fat loss. So, all right, have a
Great.
good night.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Bye-bye.